Welcome to Life L'Chaim. On today's show, Lee Lazerson welcomes Victoria Jolson, daughter-in-law of the great Al Jolson, who will tell us some great Hollywood stories. We'll be right back after these messages.
With us in studio today, we're privileged to have with us Victoria Jolson. Victoria, you've lived a tremendous life as the daughter-in-law of the great Al Jolson, married to his son Al Jolson Jr., as well as others that we're certainly going to get into. But you've recently authored this book, Beneath the Laughter. So, Victoria, welcome to Life L'Chaim.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here.
Tell us about the motivation to write Beneath the Laughter.
When I was 30 years old, my agent in England suggested to me that I write a book because he felt I had so many stories. And at that time, I thought it was rather strange. I was too young, and I'm not a writer.
Right.
And so many years later, after Red, after Al, after my daughter's tennis career, I suddenly found myself alone, sort of with nothing to do. And everything was coming out. And I thought, this is the time. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but I've got to do this. And that's when I met with Larry Cortez Hammond. That's when we decided to write the book.
Now, your book has some wonderful, wonderful stories that weave in through your friends, some of the greats of Hollywood that your life has woven through. How did you bring back those stories, or did you write them down in a diary to bring them up at this point?
It was so easy. I mean, I just sat. First of all, if you ever get to know me, I talk a lot.
Yeah.
But I just kept talking and talking and talking and talking. And it took about 3 years of talking to get this book.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, you were married. Your life is filled with, you were a dancer, you were a Rockette.
Right.
You were an opera singer.
Right.
Amazingly, you were a model. I know some of the pictures in the book of some of the work in your portfolio was just stunning.
Thank you. Bread and butter.
And right. And now you're an author. Do you have a favorite? Did you have a favorite as your life moved forward? I
think everything's so different. I think whatever you're doing at the moment has to be your favorite, or you don't do it well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, very good. So tell us, your life with Al Jolson Jr. Started when you were very young, and was very brief. But you have your beautiful gift of your daughter.
Yes, we do.
That came from that. So what was it like to live with the man whose father was one of the greats of all time, one of the great Jewish performers of all time, one of the great entertainers, in fact, the entertainer of his generation?
Well, Jolie, we call him Jolie, is so sweet. He's an unassuming, incredibly intelligent, very sweet, dear man. We're about the same age. Mm-hmm. And at the time, we were both in Nashville, Tennessee, where he had a recording studio, and I had just moved back from Europe. And we were neighbors, and we became very, very good friends first. We went to dinner. We had so much in common because we'd both lived in Europe.
Right.
And that sort of led into the romance, which led into the marriage, which led to my lovely daughter, Kate.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And then, but that was soon. It was a short marriage.
It was. Sometimes that happens. I can't explain it. I don't think he can either, because we're wonderful friends.
Very good.
I love him dearly. Yeah.
And then I know your life moved on to where you met and married David Levy, who was one of the great pioneers of television.
Yes, he was. Oh boy, yeah.
Vice president of programming at NBC, when television was at its arc. In the beginnings, I know he was responsible for Bonanza and for the elevation of Johnny Carson to the head of the Tonight Show.
Yes.
So what was that like? Because I know you tell stories of the greats in television. I know the Goodsons, who created so many of the wonderful game shows, your life with them. So share with us some of those stories.
Well, Mark Goodson was David's best friend. I mean, they were just absolutely wonderful friends. They went all the way back to before Mark's career, when Mark was an announcer. And Mark would call David at 10 o'clock at night because he had a family. He needed to support them. He wanted to stay in New York. And David would get him jobs announcing at NBC. I mean, this was under General Sarnoff. This was under Kentner,
right.
You know, Bob Kentner. These were the real beginning of television. And everybody, Milton Berle, to the day he died, he loved my husband, and he called him his boss. You know, he did everything but call him Mr. Levy. He just had so much respect for
right.
David.
What was Milton Berle like, just as a regular guy?
Oh my gosh, he was so wonderful. He was absolutely so wonderful. I remember after Milton's wife had passed away, David and I were feeling very, very sorry for him because he'd been with her so long. She was his rock. And I said, you know, David, maybe we should fix Milton up. My mother's single.
Right.
So we brought my mother in, but we told her we had a date for her, but we didn't tell her who the date was. Milton shows up at the door, sees my mother, and he says, "Hello, Mama, come to Papa."
Right.
It was so cute. And my mother, of course, nearly fainted.
Right.
He was the dearest, sweetest man. He was so good and so kind and so dear.
Very good. Well, I love how your book, weaves through some of your other relationships. So we have to, talk about that in terms of, I know Lee Patterson. When you read that part of your book, it sounds so wonderfully exotic, so romantic, in terms of the yacht and that lifestyle that you were leading with him at that time. So share with us.
Well, that was a double-edged thing with Lee because, I loved him dearly. You know, I mean, he was my boyfriend. He was my first boyfriend, and he was my New York boyfriend. I'm from the South. But I was also working very, very hard. That was a time when I had taken a job with the network for the chairman of the board of ABC. It wasn't ABC yet, it was Capital Cities, but I was working for Tom Murphy in order to pay for my opera lessons up at Juilliard. So I would work all day long, I would practice at night, but yet Lee and I managed to have this wonderful friendship and this wonderful relationship, and he was very supportive all those years to my career.
Right, but I know when I read it seemed to have ended in a. Was it bitter the way it ended, or it seemed cold?
No, it wasn't cold. It was just over.
Right.
You know, I think sometimes you just know when things are over, and I was looking kind of for a way out, but I couldn't leave him, and I got the opportunity to move to London through a couple of model agents had come to New York. They spotted me. They scouted me. And they said, "We want to bring you over to work in London." And I thought, this is perfect because Europe is where I can sing as well. So they brought me over, and it was an amicable ending. We talked a couple more times after, just nicely.
Well, we're going to take a break right here, and we're going to come back.
Lovely.
We're going to talk about your life with Red Buttons, and
yay.
What you're doing now, and some of the great stories from your past.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. We're back with Victoria Jolson, whose new book, Beneath the Laughter, is a wonderful memoir of her stories being associated with the greats of our history in television and theater. Why the title, Beneath the Laughter?
It just came to me one day. I have no idea. It's one of those things. I made up the title. It came to me. I just knew that was it.
Mm-hmm. And I know when I read it, when I first read the title, I was taken that I thought there would be a lot of sadness and heartache in there. And though, you go through and you wonderfully share those stories of the death of your husbands, but through it all is this uplifting story of the people you've met, of their stories, of their lives, and how you interwove it all. So is there a hidden sadness that...
Well, it's the comedians. So you have to go beneath that to get, I think, who they are.
Right.
And I didn't set out to write a book about the comedians. I didn't even know, I guess I set out to write a book more about Red because I wanted him to be remembered. I know that when Jolson died, it seemed that his biggest thing was that he wanted to be remembered. And his wife...
We're talking about Red Buttons.
I'm talking about Al Jolson now.
Okay.
Al Jolson wanted to be remembered, and his widow, my mother-in-law, Earl Jolson, had this huge monument built to him, the biggest monument ever built in Hollywood history to any entertainer. It can be clearly seen from the 405 freeway. It was huge, with water coming down and Moses at the top,
right,
with
wonderful.
the Torah, and it's absolutely magnificent. And I think I was trying to remember Red, because
in that way, with that same...
Well, maybe not in such a grand way,
right.
but at least the genius, behind this man, I saw at work at home. And people just, they come up and they see the silliness and they see the fun. They have no idea. This man wrote his own material. He was brilliant. He would stay up all night reading books. Not books on laughter, books, And he was I think if he hadn't been so poor, he would have been Harvard educated. There's no doubt in my mind.
So what is always fascinating is that you and your husband, David Levy, were friends with Red and his wife, Alicia, for years, for many years, preceding your relationship.
That's right.
So were there any inkling, any sparks while you were both married to your individual spouses?
Not even a twinkle.
Right?
Nothing. I mean, I asked him once. He said, no. He said, you were David's wife. He had the
So he didn't have the hots for you as you were...
No, he didn't dare because he loved David so much. It was the same thing as Milton. David produced Red Button's television show, and they became very good friends. And Red had so much respect for David. And I adored Alicia. I mean, she was gruff. She was who she was, But I thought she was interesting. And for some reason, she liked me too. So the four of us, according to quote Red, we ran together. He used to like to say that. And then when David died so close to Alicia, David died in January, Alicia died in March. And Red and I called Red to...
Bring him cookies.
Yeah, we bring food, don't we? So I just said, could I bring you over some food? And it was a Sunday, and I did. And for the first time ever, because when we went to dinner, David talked to Red, Alicia and I talked, and many times we'd take Kate, you know. So it was always that way. And for the first time ever, Red and I actually sat and talked, and it was night when we realized we were still talking, and his kids were on the way over, and I had to go home to Kate. So it became that Sunday I'd bring a cake over and we would talk until it just sort of blossomed into this, no, tonight we're going to go out.
Right. So I know you describe a story when you walk into Alicia and Red's home, that the furniture was everywhere, that it was like a flea market, that it was like just, I'm sure, all this beautifully grand furniture, but just all compounded into this beautiful Bel Air home.
Right.
So you talk about that. So did you get rid of that furniture when you two moved in together? How did...
We did move in together.
After you were married?
Oh, no, we weren't married, actually.
I'm sorry.
He died before we got married.
Oh,
so
that's
I still feel the desire and the duty, in a way, to carry on his name, you know, because I was with him. But he moved into my apartment building. The penthouse above my place became available.
Right.
So his house went up for sale to a man named Stephen Bing, who was buying up the whole hill across from the Bel Air Hotel. And it was just perfect for Red because he got an enormous fortune that he otherwise would never have gotten. Moved in. It was perfect for us. It was the way we like to live. My daughter was still at home,
Right.
although at UCLA, back and forth. And so we, in essence, we were married,
Right.
but we weren't married,
Gotcha.
living together. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to come back, talk more about your book, your life.
Thank you.
And some great stories. The Joe Namath story interests me, so
I
I want
love
to hear
that, yeah.
about that.
Okay.
We'll be back. Back with Victoria Jolson. Victoria, I was fascinated. You're an Alabama-born girl.
I am.
Went to the University of Alabama.
I did.
And though you don't really say it, you had a relationship with Joe Namath. It's not like you were so explicit as that we were boyfriend and girlfriend, but you talk about how you were enamored by him.
Crush, crush, crush. I
Right.
mean, it was my first absolute total, weak at the knees, most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen, crush.
Right.
And we did become friends. We were friends. We were not lovers or anything like that. But he was nice.
Did he know you
was
had a
my
crush
friend.
on him?
I think he knew everybody had
Right.
a crush on him. Oh yeah, yeah.
Right. And you met him, obviously both going to the University of Alabama.
I met him at a pep rally.
He was a superstar stud
Yep,
football player.
yep, yep.
And he came by. Tell us that story.
Well, he actually brushed by me and then sort of went, excuse me, at which point, you know, you just want to do a Frank Sinatra, Bobby Soxer thing.
Right.
And I had a sorority sister who knew him, and she introduced us. So we used to meet up at the corner drugstore. Joe would know that place if he hears this broadcast, the corner drug, where everybody would hang out in those days, and nobody drank really. So it was sodas and all of that, you know. And we both ended up in New York at the same time. And that's what made the friendship even more, because I became a Rockette and Joe became, you know, a Jet.
Right.
So the first person I called when I was accepted into the Rockettes was my mother. But the second person was Joe.
Right.
And he was so excited. He was at home, it was in the evening, with his roommate who also went to the University of Alabama, a man named Ray Abruzzi, who was playing with the Jets.
Sure.
And he said, well, come over. We're having dinner, we're cooking steak and eggs, we'll celebrate. So I got in a taxi and I went over, and it was funny to see the two of them do a ballet in the kitchen.
Right.
But they cooked. It was good. The steak was good. The eggs were good. You know, everything was fine. They cleaned up. It was nice. And then we went into the living room, and he said, well, here, Vicky, because that's what Vicky, have a chocolate. You know, I said, I can't. I've got to fit into the Rockette costume.
Right.
I'm on a diet. I've just lost all this weight. He said, oh, have one. It won't hurt. These are imported. They're special. So I had one. It was good. It was delectable. It was delicious, and it was crunchy. He said, have another one. Okay, all right. So I had another chocolate. Delectable, delicious, crunchy. Have the whole box. Then they started to roll over in laughter. And I thought, what is it? I had just eaten chocolate-covered grasshoppers.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. So, you see,
Right.
even if you're Joe Namath,
Right,
he's
they're
still a
playing games.
4-year-old boy.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So your mother was adopted,
Right. Her mother died in childbirth.
and you found out you were Jewish into your mid-30s.
I did, on my mother's side.
On your mother's side.
On my
So
mother's side.
What was that experience like to find out that this faith that you had been raised in wasn't your birth?
It was interesting, but strangely enough, My mother and I were not that surprised, and I'll tell you why. All of my friends in London are Jewish. All of my friends in Beverly Hills are Jewish. Everybody I was hanging around, I was gravitating toward Jewish people and not even thinking about it. I felt most comfortable. So when I found out I went, oh good. You know, oh
Right.
good. So I've been going for Hebrew lessons. I'm terrible at it, but
Right.
I've tried, you know. And Torah and synagogue and everything. And oh yes, I think it's profound.
Right.
It is.
And of course, your first husband's father is obviously one of the great
Yes.
entertainer in Jewish
Yes.
and revered.
Yes.
As one of, he's Jewish as some of the greats of show business are.
Absolutely.
Very
Probably
good.
the greatest entertainer, in my opinion, of all time.
Right.
Ever.
Very good. And I know in terms of some of the other stories in your book, some of your favorites, I know you've come in contact with some of the greats in tennis. And share with us some of your favorite people of all time in the world of show business.
Okay. Well, you mentioned tennis. My daughter, very talented tennis player. Kate played for UCLA. She was a star at Beverly Hills High School. She was one of the top junior tennis players in the country. And she studied with the absolute #1 coach. I just happened to find him. I was sitting at one of the places that had taken Kate to study tennis, and I heard a couple of mothers, and they were talking. They were saying, Robert Lansdorp, he's the greatest coach in the world, and do you know he charges $100 an hour? He's over there at the Riviera. And I'm thinking, and they're going like, yuck, and I'm going, the greatest coach in the world is only 20 minutes away at the Riviera, and he only charges, $100. So we got her accepted by Lansdorp, but Lansdorp's other student included a young, very young, to be true, 11 years old, Maria Sharapova.
Heard of her.
And Maria and Kate really grew up together. They were hitting partners until Kate went to UCLA, and Maria won Wimbledon.
Right.
So they were very, very, very good friends.
Very good.
Another wonderful story, because I can't leave out this person. One of the dearest friends that I've had, girlfriends, is Phyllis Stiller.
We have about a minute left.
Okay. Phyllis was the consummate pro. She was the ultimate consummate pro. And the proof in the pudding is in a story that Red Buttons told me. They both had a gig in some place in the Midwest. It was an icy night. Red chose to stay in the hotel where the gig was. Phyllis wanted to stay in a new hotel down the road. Phyllis got in the chauffeur-driven car. It was icy. The car got stuck. The chauffeur got out, went behind the car. Phyllis is sitting in the car, and Phyllis hears it, feels the thump. And she does it. She's still sitting. She's sitting. She's sitting. She's sitting. Finally, she gets out of the car, and the person has died. The car has rolled back over the person. And she goes, Phyllis shows up at the hotel, does the show, has Red do the show, and then she comes off the stage and completely falls apart. And Red goes, what happened? What happened? She held that in all that time because the show must go on.
Very good. And the show must go on with Beneath the Laughter.
Thank you.
So a wonderful read, wonderful stories inside.
you.
We just covered the surface.
Yes, we did. We didn't go
some of
beneath
that.
yet.
We didn't go beneath yet. So I urge everybody to get this book. Victoria Jolson, thank you very much for joining us on To Life L'Chaim.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Shalom.
That's it for this edition. For more information on our show, please visit us on the web at tolifel'chaim.com. I'm Lee Lazerson. Thank you very much for joining us. And To Life L'Chaim.